Ekabo, and welcome to another episode of Talking Ifá with me, Babalawo Salako. In today's episode, I want to discuss the topic of Ìkín. What are Ìkín? What are they used for? And what do they do to enhance our wonderful spiritual world in this Yoruba religion of Ifá? So without further ado, let's talk. Greetings. I'm Babalawo Salako. I was initiated as a priest of Ifá and Obatala in Nigeria in 2006, and I've been practicing the Ifá Orisha religion for over 30 years now. My mission is simple: to help those who are new to the religion or lost in the religion. So if that's you, then buckle up and join me. This is Talking Ifá. So today I want to talk about Ìkín. So let's talk about Ìkín, what they are, what they're used for, and what marvelous properties Ìkín have. Now, this comes from a question that I received, and the person said on a previous episode that I did, I mentioned how Ìkín travel. So I thought that I would go ahead and clear that up and discuss what that is. So they said, it was said that Ìkín travels. How do Ìkín travel to you and from you? If it is a divination process where Babalawo informs you on how many Ìkín you have, or are they physical and someone literally hands you Ìkín? So let's dive into that for a minute. So before I go into that, let's find out a little bit about this and how you actually pronounce the term, because they spelled it E-K-E-N or E-K-E-N-E. So the proper way of spelling it is I-K-I-N, but let's go into it a little bit so we can understand that. So first of all, to pronounce it properly, you need to know a little bit about the Yoruba language. The Yoruba language comes from the Yoruba people of Southwest Nigeria. It's their native language, okay? So it says the Yoruba, or a Niger-Congo language spoken by roughly 50 million people in West Africa. And it is primarily known as a tonal language, right? Where the pitch of a syllable determines the meaning of the word. Meaning you can have word that's spelled the same, but how you pronounce it with the pitch determines the actual meaning of the word. So in Yoruba, we call it a singing language. You basically sing when you speak. And there are three tones: low, mid, and high, kind of like do, re, mi. So all of the language and the words deal with do, re, mi, low, mid, high. Okay, so when they write it, they have what's called tone marks. So if you see words, Yoruba words with tone marks, so for a low tone, you have a mark that goes kind of to the left, angled to the left on top of the letter. And that represents a low tone, do. Mid-range doesn't have any mark over the letter. So if you see a letter in Yoruba with no mark over the top, that means it's re, or the mid-tone. And then mi, high tone, is a mark over the letter that's leaning to the right. So that determines how it is said. So that's the first part. So I wanted to go over that. And for instance, here, there's an example of a word spelled O-K-O, meaning different things depending on how it's pronounced. So in one instance, O-K-O can represent husband. It could represent a vehicle. So husband is re, re, two midtones, re, re, oko, re, re. A farming hoe, not the other kind, farming hoe is re, mi, mid, high, re, mi, oko. And a vehicle is re, do, re, do. So if you pronounce that in those different ways, it means something totally different. So Ìkín itself, how do we pronounce Ìkín? So Ìkín has, the first I is a low tone. The second I is a high tone. So they skip the mid-range on that. So instead of do, re, mi, it's do, mi, do, mi. So Ìkín, do, mi. That's the first thing you have to know when you're pronouncing the term. The other thing about Yoruba language is it has certain words that are called consonants that are nasalized, meaning you don't. So for instance, the N at the end of Ìkín is actually nasalized, which means you do not touch the top of your mouth with your tongue. So if we say in, we touch the top of our mouth when we say in English. But here we say in without touching the top of our mouth, and we make it nasalized. We go in, you go like in. Instead of in, it's in. So when you say do, mi, Ìkín, the N is not, you don't touch the top of your mouth, so it's a nasalized N. So the proper way of saying Ìkín is Ìkín, like that, okay? Do, mi, Ìkín. So that's the proper way of pronouncing it. Because in Yoruba, when you're doing words remember we're in a spiritual practice. So a lot of times we do invocations, we do chants, we do prayers. If we're doing them in Yoruba, you want to make sure you're pronouncing the words properly so that you're actually saying the right words when you're doing your prayers, your invocations, etc. Okay, so it's important to learn a little bit about Yoruba. So let's go on beyond that and let's say, what are Ìkín? What are they? Well, if you're watching this on YouTube, I have images here of actual Ìkín. They are palm nuts, sacred palm nuts. There are a lot of different palm nuts, but for the ones that are used in Ifá, they are sacred, right? So these Ìkín have eyes, right? They see. So if you look here, these are four-eyed Ìkín. Some have 3 eyes, etc. But these have 4 eyes. If you look here on the right, the top one has been prepared to be processed, consecrated, to be used with Ifá. I can tell because the eyes are open. The bottom when the eyes aren't open, so it looks like it's partially there, but it's not how we do them. But these are the sacred palm nuts of Ifá that we call Ìkín. Now, what are Ìkín used for? So we need to know that too. What are they used for? So in Ifá, they're used for divination. Sometimes they're used for prayer. They're used for worship, right? So in the previous slide, you saw the tray, the sacred tray, or we call Opon Ifá, that we use for divination, the divination tray. And you saw Ìkín on it. So diviners, Ifá priests, Babalaos or Yin Ifás can use Ìkín to divine, right? But you also can use them to pray. So for instance, if you receive your Hand of Ifá, you can pray to your Hand of Ifá using your Ìkín. You can also make offerings to your Ìkín, which is part of how they're used in worship. But first, I want to encourage you to align your 2026 with Ifá Orisha tradition. The 2026 Ifá Days calendar and planner are here. So you can track your Itaro Gun days, the 4-day week, the sacred Orisha days to keep your spiritual path in focus. This is perfect for organizing your rituals, your growth, your daily life, all in one place. So I strongly encourage you to secure your Ifá Orisha history today. Get yours now at talkingifa.carrd.co. talkingifa.carrd.co. So I mentioned Hand of Ifá, and I mentioned priests who are initiated. So first of all, what does it mean to be initiated? You go through a whole process of being fully initiated to an Orisha. It's not the same as just receiving the icons of that Orisha. So if you receive an Eshu, or you receive Ogun, or you receive Obatala, or Oshun, or a Hand of Ifá, you're receiving the icons that have been consecrated with the Ashe of that particular Orisha on those icons. So you can receive that, but if you receive a Hand of Ifá, that doesn't mean you're initiated to Ifá. It just means you receive the icons of Ifá that has some of the Ashe of Orunmila infused in them that you can use for spiritual worship and prayer. Okay? Full initiation is different, right? So these are ways of how you get your own Ìkín. So you say, how do I get Ìkín? You get Ìkín if you receive a Hand of Ifá, or if you get initiated to Ifá, Orunmila. If you get initiated, you receive Ìkín or a Hand of Ifá. Those are the two ways. Now, of course, you can go and order and go to the store and buy your own sacred palm nuts, but if they're not consecrated, they're not sacred palm nuts. They're just palm nuts or palm kernel nuts with no ashe or no spiritual power. You need to have an Ifá priest or multiple Ifá priests consecrate to give you your Ìkín through a Hand of Ifá, or they initiate you to Ifá as a full priest. So what is the difference between that? One, receiving your Hand of Ifá in traditional Yoruba, or what we call Ìṣẹ̀ṣe, is called Ìṣẹ̀fá. And to get full initiation is Ìtẹ̀fá, right? So in West African Ìṣẹ̀ṣe Yoruba traditional lineage, the Hand of Ifá is known as Ìṣẹ̀fá. I'm reading what it says here. It is considered a pre-initiation rite that establishes a direct spiritual connection between you and Orunmila. Orunmila is the Orisha or deity that you would receive when you get your Hand of Ifá. And Orunmila, they say, is the deity of wisdom and witness to one's contents of their Ori. Meaning, before we come, we all choose our Ori at Ajala's house. And when we receive our Ori, Orunmila is there in the room as a witness to what Ori we chose. So Ifá knows what the contents of our Ori are. Okay? So if you receive a Hand of Ifá, you're just receiving the icons of Orunmila, and now you can worship Orunmila directly. You're not initiated as an Ifá priest. You can't go and start divining for people or anything like that. It's just for you, for your protection and guidance in your life. And you received an Odu. When you receive your Hand of Ifá, you receive an Odu, which can guide you in your life, right? And up until the time you decide you want to get initiated to Orunmila, Ifá Orunmila. If you want to become an Ifá priest, then you receive a new Odu that supersedes the previous one. But if you don't get initiated, because everybody does not get initiated, and you do not have to get initiated to practice this religion, if you just receive a Hand of Ifá, then that Odu you use as your guiding Odu, okay, until you get initiated to someone. Now, my Aluwo, the Awishe Agbaye Professor Wande Abimbola, he told me once that in the old days, everybody's children in Yoruba land, when they were children, early on, they would all receive their Hand of Ifá, Ìṣẹ̀fá. Just everybody would receive it. Nowadays, that's not the case. So people usually, have to choose to do that, or their family may want to get them to do it early on, or they may get it later, etc. Now, Ìtẹ̀fá, I'm going to read what it says here, is the sacred, comprehensive initiation ceremony in the Yoruba Ifá tradition of Ìṣẹ̀ṣe that formally connects a person to Orunmila. You're connected to Orunmila, not you just have the icons of Orunmila, in your house that has Ashe, a room that you can go to and you can pray and ask for help and you can do offerings to and do worship to. When you become a priest, you receive the Ashe of that Orisha on your head, most of the time on your head, unless for Ifá, definitely on your head. And so it connects you directly with that Orisha, whether you get initiated to Rumula, whether you get initiated to Obatala, Oshun, Ogun, etc. It connects you to that Orisha. And it marks your transition into a devoted practitioner. And it says often as a Babalawo priest or Ìkín Ifá priestess. Okay, technically, just because you get initiated to Ifá doesn't immediately make you a Babalawo. You have to train for that. So it says this is a 7-day ritual. So let me go back to Ishefa. Ishefa, the way we do it in my lineage, and I'm like my Luos, like I said, Professor Wande Bambola, it's a 3-day process to receive your Hand of Ifá. For initiation, it's a 7-day process. And Baba Wande says that way back, decades and decades, a long time ago, it used to be longer than that. It used to be 21 days, and before that, it was longer than that. It might have been 6 months, I can't remember, but it was at least 21 days for a while. Then they trimmed it down to 7, and that's where we stop now. If you're out doing search, because remember, I'm targeting people that are new to the religion or lost in the religion. So if you're out surfing and looking online and TikTok and all that, you probably see people now doing things differently. Maluo and our lineage doesn't agree with that. They say you need at least 7 days. Some people are trying to initiate in 3 days. Some people are trying to say they're doing it in 1 day. One of my teachers, Baba Wande's son, Baba Kola Bambola, said there's even people that are going, like he said, they going to the beach, I don't know if it was Virginia Beach, and telling people that they're initiated in a 30-minute ceremony, and they say they're initiated. My suggestion would be, if anybody comes to you and says you can get initiated in less than 7 days, then I would run, right? Because it's kind of like, think about it, if you want to season something that you're trying to cook, or some meat, and you want to marinate it 33 hours or overnight or whatever, so that the flavor is infused in it, it's going to be a different taste than if you just took it and threw some seasoning and cooked it right away. It's not going to be as flavorful. When you initiate, you get the Ashe put on your head, and then you need time to go through the ceremonies for that week to just start marinating into your system, and you get fully, so you're full of that Ifá flavor, right? Or whatever Risha you get initiated to. So it's a 7-day ritual. And then you receive your Odu, which can help guide you on your life's path, providing deep spiritual, personal, and professional guidance through taboos. You receive your taboos through the rituals and the acquisition of their own sacred palm nuts we call Ìkín Ifá. So let's get to the crux of the question. The question was, how do Ìkín travel? Okay, so what does it mean that Ìkín travel? So there's something that happens sometimes when you receive your Ìkín. So like for us in my lineage, when we give Hands of Ifá, we normally give 21. You get 21 of the palm kernel nuts, Ìkín, sacred Ìkín, consecrated. You can also get 18. So it's either 18 or 21. And there's a reason for that. But what it means that it travels is that sometimes the Ìkín, which are spiritual entities unto themselves, they decide they want to travel. So say you have 18 Ìkín in your Hand of Ifá. You go each day, and part of the ritual of praying to Ifá with your Ìkín is you count your Ìkín. So we go through, and there's a ritual way of counting your Ìkín. So you count, and you have 18 and you go, and then, a couple years later, one day you get up and then you count, and all of a sudden you only have 17. And you're looking all over the room. You say, well, I don't take my Ìkín anywhere except in my shrine room. Where does the other one go? And you can't find it. So you go on and you go on, and all of a sudden one day you count and you only have 16. You're looking all over, you can't find it. So what Baba Wande says is they travel. Sometimes they just go somewhere and you don't know where they went. And then sometimes miraculously they'll come back. Then you get 16. 3 months later, you're counting your Ìkín, and all of a sudden you have 17 again. And you say, wait a minute, where did that come from? So it's kind of a spiritual thing. But when I say they travel, that's what I mean. Ìkín actually travel. I even had a godbrother of mine, a Babalawo, good friend. He said one day he was sitting there counting his Ìkín, and then, over time, one of them traveled. Later, he came, and months later, he's counting, and it came back. He had his full. Then some months later, he counted, and he had an extra Ìkín. So if he had 18, now he had 19. He's like, where did that come from? I have 19 now. I only had 18 originally. Because that Ìkín may have come from somewhere else. They wanted to come and visit you. But they travel, okay? So that's what I mean by they travel. So why is that even important? Why is it an issue that Ìkín travel? Okay, so this is why it's so important. Because Orunmila has a number, and Orunmila's number is 16. Now, when you receive your Ìkín, for you to have a full hand of Ifá, you must have at least 16 Ìkín. So Baba Wande Abimbola says, if you don't have 16 Ìkín, you do not have Ifá. You don't have Ifá Orunmila, the ashe of it is gone. Orunmila is gone. Orunmila is not there with you, meaning, so if you have 18 Ìkín, then you get down to 17. Then all of a sudden you count and you only have 16. I would recommend that you go back to your Aluo or who gave you your Hand of Ifá and see if you can go through a ceremony to add more Ìkín, because if you drop below 16 Ìkín and all of a sudden one day to travel and you go in and you only have 15, now you no longer have Ìṣẹ̀fà. You no longer have a Hand of Ifá. You just have 15 palm kernel nuts with no ashe, with no spiritual power, because Ifá leaves. You must have 16 to have Ifá, the ashe of Ifá with you. So now what has to happen? Well, if you drop below 16, now you have to go through a whole nother ceremony to receive another Hand of Ifá. Now you can use the 15 or 14 Ìkín that you have, add to them, but you have to go through a whole nother ceremony, and yes, you have to pay for it normally, and you got to go get another Hand of Ifá consecrated for you. Now, if you remember your Odu, because some people receive Hands of Ifá and the people don't stress to them that you received an Odu. And if they got their Hand of Ifá 5 years ago and now they have less than 16 Ìkín and they need to go to another ceremony, they don't remember their Odu. And they ask, what is your Odu? They don't know. Now, if you don't remember your Odu that you received, then you'll get a new Odu when you receive your new Hand of Ifá or go through the new ceremony. If you remember it, the ceremony can be done, at least in my lineage, using the Odu that you had previously to consecrate your new hand. But the key is, why it's an issue for your Ìkín to travel is because if you get below 16, you no longer have a Hand of Ifá. You can pray to it, but Ifá's not there, right? You're just rubbing some sacred, you're not sacred, you're rubbing palm kernel nuts or doing whatever you're doing with them, and there's no spiritual power there to it, right? I know. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you do not have Ifá if you have less than 16, okay? That's why a lot of times we may give 21, so you have 5 extra. So if some travel, you still got some flexibility and leeway. Now, the other thing is, when you receive your Hand of Ifá, Ifá Rumula, is the only deity that I know that you can be that intimate with. You can pick up the Ìkín on a daily basis, and the way we pray the Ifá is you count your Ìkín, and there's a way that we do that, a ritualistic way we count. You count your Ìkín, and then you pick up. You can pray with more. You can count and pray with 16 Ìkín, or you can pick up all of your Ìkín. And Baba Wande says every now and then you need to pray with all of them, because if you only pray with the same 16 every time and you had 18 or you had 21, those other Ìkín might get jealous that you never are using them or you don't pay them any attention. So we recommend that every now and then you pick up all of your hand and you put them in your hand and you rub them together and you pray with them, okay? And there's prayers you do, touching your ori, present it to your ori, your chest, and then you pray and tell Ifá what it is issues you have and what you might want help with, et cetera, et cetera. That's how we pray. And you could do this every day, okay? So that is what I wanted to go over about Ìkín. And I hope I answered this fine person's question on Ìkín. They are actual things. They are palm kernel nuts. And you can tell exactly how many you have at all times because you can count them and you keep them in your container. So I hope that helps clear that question up, and I hope that benefited some other people on learning what Ìkín are and what they're used for. So it is February 2026 right now when I'm recording this. So make sure to look into the comments below to order your calendar. I have my Ifá Days calendar for this year, 2026, and my Ifá Days planner, so you can keep track of your journey. So if you get your Hand of Ifá, you can say when you received it. If you're doing prayers and asking for certain things on each days, you can keep track of that, and you can look back months from now, years from now, and you'll have your own spiritual history documented and your journey documented. So I hope everybody, I wish you the best. Ireo, o dabo.